Hello and welcome to another episode of Nick in the Kitchen. I'm Nick, and today we're celebrating Black History Month, and I thought what better way to do that than by taking a Black American classic, mac and cheese, and making it vegan. This is another alternative and another option for people who are seeking to have less animal products in their diet, or if you just want to try something new, trust and believe this has all the flavors of a traditional mac and cheese without all the animal products, and I'm gonna walk you through it step by step. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna jump into making our roux. So this is like a custardy based mac and cheese, which means we're going to take flour and butter and we're gonna cook it down together, add in our milk, which is going to create a mother sauce called a bechamel. Then we'll add in our cheeses. So we're basically making a vegan Mornay sauce, which is a fancy word for cheese sauce. So I'm turning on my pan now, and you just want to have this like on low to medium. You don't want it to get too hot because you don't want things to burn. And we're making a blonde roux, which means we are cooking the flour enough to get a little bit of a golden color, but all we're really doing is cooking out the rawness. So I'm adding in my vegan butter now. This is Miyoko's Kitchen butter. I don't mind plugging their name because it's a really good butter. It tastes like traditional butter and it cooks exactly the same way. You can even brown it to make like brown butter vegan items, which is really hard to do with some vegan butter. So we're just melting this down in the pan. And I like to work this with a wooden spoon. I'll grab a whisk in just a second because when we add our milk to our roux, we really want to make sure that we don't get any like bumps and lumps. So we're cooking down this butter and it's all melted and we don't want it to be too brown. So we're gonna go ahead and add in our flour. I like to do a 1 to an almost 1 ratio. So that was about 2 tablespoons of butter. So I'm gonna add in just about 1.5 tablespoons of flour. That makes sure that we have like a loose roux and it's not too thick because we don't want gloppy mac and cheese. No one likes that. All right, so we're gonna add all of our flour at once and we're gonna stir this around so that we kind of incorporate it together. It becomes one sauce. We're kind of preemptively getting out the lumps from the mac and cheese by cooking this together. And again, we don't want it too dark, we don't want it too brown. We just want it to cook out that raw flour flavor, which takes about 2-3 minutes. And the good thing about this is you can smell the nuttiness as the flour cooks out and as the butter cooks, which is really, really delicious. That means you're already to a good start of having a great mac and cheese. So I have some milk here that I've preheated. If you really want a successful, non-lumpy mac and cheese, having your milk be about the same temperature as your roux is really gonna help you out. It doesn't have to kind of warm up to the same temperature. I'm pretty much following my traditional mac and cheese recipe, which is on lizzieangel.com, and just subbing out the animal products. So this milk was steeped with a bay leaf and some onion just to flavor the milk. We want to add flavor to all of our components. And so we have this down. So now we're going to add in a little bit first and get that stirred around. You can use a whisk for this step if you want. If you're not like used to making mac and cheese, you can definitely do that. And it helps to get all those lumps out, but just stir it really vigorously to get all of that out. And once you have kind of the lumps out in one section, you can go ahead and add in the remainder of your milk. When you're heating up your milk, you really want to be sure to just warm it on low. You don't want it to scorch or burn because that'll make your entire mac and cheese taste burnt. And we all know if you're bringing mac and cheese to any function, it needs to be on point, okay? You don't want to be that person that they talk about who had the gross mac and cheese at the cookout, even if it was vegan. And so what we're doing now is just heating this through till it thickens up, and we want it to be able to coat the back of this spoon. So as of now, it slides right off. So we're just going to keep stirring, making sure you get the bottom because we don't want anything to stick to the bottom, because if it sticks, it could potentially burn. And again, you get that burnt flavor throughout your mac and cheese. So we're just going ahead and stirring this. This will probably take about 4 to 6 minutes to really get to the consistency that we want before we start adding in our flavorings and making the mac and cheese do what it does. One of the things that people can find kind of annoying about mac and cheese is that you do have to babysit it. It's not one of those things where you can just kind of throw butter and flour into a pan, walk away, come back, add the milk, walk away and come back. You really have to keep it moving. That will prevent it from sticking, from burning, from getting lumps. Once you get lumps in it, it's harder to get those out, but you can definitely do that. There's some troubleshooting that you can do. If you have lumps in your mac and cheese, you can throw your sauce into a blender, smooth it out and add it back into the pan. You can also use an immersion blender to kind of stick it right in there and get those lumps out if you run into that problem. It takes a little bit of practice for some people, and there's nothing wrong with that. You want to perfect your dishes every single time, so just being sure that you're doing that. And I didn't even tell you what kind of milk I'm using. So I use macadamia nut milk for this. I wanted something with a high fat content because it needs to kind of coat your tongue and stick with you. And so I found that coconut milk will work, but coconut milk is kind of sweet. So it'll leave that coconutty flavor and that bit of sweetness in your dish, and I don't really love that. Soy milk also works really well. It has a high fat content and also has enough protein to stand up to a mac and cheese recipe. I just try to personally limit the amount of soy that I eat in my diet. So then I tried macadamia nut milk, which I think tastes the most like milk next to cashew milk, but it has more fat than cashew milk. So it really works to create a roux and to create a really good mac and cheese base. All right, so we've been stirring this for a while, about 6 to 8 minutes. It really depends on the milk that you use, because that's gonna kind of determine which thickness you get, how rich it is. And so it's thick enough to coat the back of a spoon like this. There's a little bit of extra milk because I like really creamy mac and cheese, especially when it's vegan. So we're gonna go ahead and add in the rest of our ingredients. So I have a mixture here of my spice blend. This is the same one from the recipe. The only thing that I've added is 1.5 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, because that's gonna really enforce that cheesy flavor. So we're gonna go ahead and add that in to here. It already starts to smell good with the garlic powder and the mustard and the paprika. Smells cheesy. And then we're gonna add in about 1/2 tablespoon of, you can use Worcestershire. Just be sure it doesn't have anchovies if you're strictly following the plant-based vegan. I'm using tamari because it gives you that same umami flavor. And then I'm gonna add in a couple dashes of hot sauce. It's not gonna make it spicy, but it's gonna give it just enough of that kick and oomph that you want. And then the star of the show, we have our cheese blend. This is a vegan cheddar and a vegan mozzarella blend. And so I'm actually gonna turn off the heat and I'm gonna add this in. And unlike my traditional mac and cheese recipe, we're not going to add this into the middle layers because it's harder for it to melt down in the actual mac and cheese. But when it's in this pot and we're cooking it down, we get a nice cheesy blend. And so it's already starting to melt down, super cheesy. You get really good flavor with this blend. You get the sharpness of a traditional cheddar, and you get that smooth creaminess of a mozzarella. And so now it's getting all melted in. As you can see, that looks like a good cheesy sauce. And so we want to make sure that the cheese is all the way melted into the sauce before we add in our noodles, because when we add in our noodles, we're just getting those coated and then we're gonna add it right to our pan. And this recipe is for 2 to 4 people. Could be 1 if you believe in yourself, but it's really for 2 to 4 people, depending on your serving sizes. It's gonna make a small pan of mac and cheese, so you only need a small baking dish. This isn't like a Thanksgiving size for a crowd. But if you just want enough to kind of give to people, this is perfect, especially if you're trying to make people converts. And so you can see that's a really good cheesy sauce. It's like the perfect macaroni and cheese sauce. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna give this a taste. I wanna make sure that it's seasoned appropriately. So the flavor is so good. It tastes so cheesy. It's not as salty as animal-based cheeses and cheddar, so I am gonna add in just a little bit more salt for my taste. Everything else there's just enough of. That mustard powder really comes through, and I think that's what really enforces that cheddar flavor in combination with that nutritional yeast. And I have some noodles that I boiled already. You want to boil these so that they're about 2 minutes under from being done. That'll keep them from overcooking in the mac and cheese. This is about 8 ounces of pasta that I'm adding in. And I like to add in like half of the noodles to see where we are. I don't want so many noodles that it soaks up all of our sauce. So I add this in, and if I need more, I'll add more. Some people like a lot of noodles just barely coated. I like a good mix so that we have pockets of sauce and cheesiness. I don't know if you guys can hear this. Let me get close to pick it up on the mic. But it's making that mac and cheese sound. And when you hear that sound, anytime, you know it's going down, whether it's mac and cheese or any other places. So we have this here, and you guys can see that is like creamy goodness right there. And so I'm gonna add in just a little bit more of our pasta. Get that stirred in and transfer this to a baking dish. Now, technically this is cooked. Our pasta's a little underdone, but you could leave it in here and it would be fine. It's fine like this, but you know, I don't like fine, I like excellent. So we're going to go ahead and add our mac and cheese to this buttered dish. It's buttered with that same butter that we used before. That's gonna prevent it from sticking, and also just add in a little bit more flavor. Growing up, I used to come into town and go to North Carolina where my big mama is and my big daddy was, and so like mac and cheese was something that they always made because it's like a really popular Southern dish, but it's really popular in my family also. And so that's where I first learned to make a roux and to cook it like this. And that was something I didn't know was a classic technique, and it's something that we've always done. And so, you know, it's that easy. You don't have to go to culinary school to learn how to make these things. You just have to be passionate. And so now, you know, I'm adding this to our dish here, and look at this. I mean, it is creamy, it's unctuous, it's savory, it's cheesy, which is super important in a mac and cheese. And depending on the color of your nutritional yeast, you'll get different colors of your mac and cheese. So this is a little more of our like golden yellow color. You can get a bright yellow color. You can even add in like turmeric or some like roasted red peppers to give it more of an orangey color. And I have one more thing that I like to do to my mac and cheese, and that is to put on the crumbly top. So let's make that really quickly. All right, so for our crumbly top for our mac and cheese, I have a little bit of melted butter, about a tablespoon. And then I have about 1/4 cup of breadcrumbs and some Italian seasoning and nutritional yeast mixed in here. And I'm just gonna add in a pinch of salt. We wanna make sure every layer of our food is seasoned. So we're gonna go ahead and add this in there. And then I'm just gonna use this spoon. You know, when you're in the kitchen, you kind of just have to make it work how you make it work. And so there's no rules. If you want to use the back of a measuring spoon to stir around your breadcrumbs, you go ahead and do that. I'm not gonna judge you. I don't want you guys to judge me either. So I'm gonna get this mixed in. Now I will say traditionally, this is not something that I typically have grown up having. It's not really a thing to put the breadcrumbs on top, but it's something that I grew to love. Usually we put on cheese, and on my traditional recipe, I do put a layer of cheese and then I put the breadcrumbs. But I realized that in the oven, the cheese that I use doesn't really melt down to give you like an appealing look. So the breadcrumbs kind of serve that purpose. And it also adds texture because mac and cheese is very creamy, but when the noodles cook, you know, they have a little bit of bite to them, but they're pretty soft. And so adding this on top, it just gets a really good kind of crunchiness, adds a pop of flavor with the herbs. And because this butter acts just like butter, animal-based butter, we get a nice kind of browned flavor as well. And so this is our mac and cheese all ready for the oven. If you can find grated vegan parm, they used to sell it by Go Veggie, but I haven't seen it in a while in my stores. But if you have it, that would be perfect to mix in here too. So I'm gonna pop this in the oven, and it's already pretty much baked. We're just trying to get it set. So we're gonna pop it in the oven for about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna dig in. It's bubbling, It's oozing. It's delicious. I am so excited to dig into this. Now, I will say, you should not eat this right away. You should give yourself like at least 5 minutes to let it cool down, much like you would do with meat, to kind of let the juices redistribute into the meat. This is the same with mac and cheese, whether it is plant-based or not. You don't want hot lava in your mouth, and you really want to give everything a chance to kind of settle down so you don't lose any of that goodness you just worked so hard for. So I'm gonna let this chill out for a second, and then I'm gonna put it on a plate and I'm gonna taste it right on camera for you guys. All right, the time has come. We're gonna dig into this vegan mac and cheese. It's so gooey and cheesy, and I'm so excited. So I have my plate here, and I'm trying to get like all this topping because it really is my favorite part. You see how it gets nice and brown. It just adds so much flavor. And look at that, guys. Like, it's not even fair, honestly. It smells amazing. You can really smell all the seasonings that we put in there. You guys see that? See how cheesy it is? It's literally falling off the plate. And smoking. It's probably still a little bit too hot, I'm not gonna lie to you. But it's worth it. It's worth everything we're about to go through. So I'm actually gonna grab my friend Tiffany. If you guys listen to the podcast, you know Tiffany is my partner in crime, my cousin, my best friend. So I'm gonna grab her. She's not vegan. So we're gonna see what she thinks about this on camera, so you know I'm not just hyping myself up, okay? All right, let's go grab her. All right, guys, we have Tiffany. Tiffany, say hi.
Hi.
Here is a fork.
Thank you.
Here, I'll taste some with you. We're gonna taste this mac and cheese. Make sure you blow it if it's smoking like this, okay?
It's very creamy and it kind of tastes almost sweet.
It's the milk, because it's really hard to find a milk that isn't too sweet, but it's not overly sweet like you would get with the coconut milk. The soy milk will also work if you want to eliminate all of that, but I think it brings it balance, right?
I agree.
And then the little crunchy bits, like add texture. It's a good mac and cheese.
I would actually, if you had told me, brought this in and didn't tell me it was vegan, I would never have guessed. So
It almost reminds you of like a butternut squash mac and cheese.
I'd say yes, like I've ever had one.
But it does, because it gives you that little bit of sweetness, but you still got a lot of creaminess. It has that earthiness to it. We added in the nutritional yeast, which reinforces that cheesy flavor. And then all the spices that are in there just like make it. So you guys, make this, like make it for yourselves. Like I said, Black History Month. For me, this dish really encompasses that because it's such a strong and popular dish in my family. But amongst Black culture, there's so many memes about you can't make the mac and cheese, like whose mac and cheese is the best. And this is just something that is like really special and really important to me because it's a family recipe that's just been handed down, and then everybody makes it their own. So make sure you take a moment, make some mac and cheese, whether you go on lizzieangel.com and make the other mac and cheese that I have. There's 3 on there right now. This will be the 4th. Or you make this vegan one. Just go ahead and give it a try. Thanks so much for tuning in, and see you next time.